got a critical mass. Thanks, Mel, and we've got recording happening, so I might kick us off. Welcome, folks. Lovely to see you. My name's Jackie Mumford. I am the CEO of the Nature Conservation Council of New South Wales, and very excited to be here to host the Heathcote Candidate Forum for candidates running in the New South Wales state election for the seat of Heathcote. My name is Jackie Mumford, and very happy to be joined by our co-hosts this evening. We've got Birdlife Australia, the Sutherland Shire Environment Centre, the Total Environment Centre, and Protect Our Water Alliance. So great to have a good mix of some local groups and state-based groups and even national groups with Birdlife Australia joining us. Before we get started tonight, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the Dharawal country, where the electorate is based. I'm also joining the meeting from the land of the Awabakal people, and I'd like to acknowledge that sovereignty has never been ceded and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to acknowledge any First Nations people who might be joining us on the call today. So the 25th of March is rapidly approaching. Anyone who's campaigning, and I'm thinking obviously of our candidates here tonight, or any volunteers and third-party campaigners, whatever capacity you might be involved in the election, certainly feels like it is coming up faster and faster. We'll be hearing from the candidates who have joined us this evening. They'll be given an opportunity to introduce themselves and say a bit about why they're running. They'll have a prepared response for that, for their introduction, and then we have provided a few questions ahead of time so that the candidates have had some time to think about the questions that are important to the environment groups of the area and provide some thoughtful responses to those questions. We'll also go to a live question and answer session once we've heard the responses from our candidates on the prepared topics. So please, throughout this evening, I encourage you to engage in the chat function within Zoom. You can post in there. You might like to post what Indigenous country you're joining from. You can also post questions in the chat as we go along. You might notice that you've been placed on mute on entry into the meeting this evening. Just because of the numbers that we have, we want to minimise background noise as much as possible and ensure that we won't have any people speaking over the top of one another. We are recording the session tonight. If that is a problem for you, you can always just turn your camera off if you would rather not be recorded. You can use speaker view in the top right-hand corner of your screen so you can see whoever's speaking. And as I said, the chat button is down the bottom of your screen, and I encourage any conversation that you'd like to engage in to happen there. And we'll collect those questions and hopefully we can get through as many of those as we can once we've heard from all of our candidates. And just if you are using the chat function, I encourage you to share your messages to everyone rather than using the private function, just so that we can see if there are common themes coming up in the questions, so that we know that we're getting a good measure of that. You can also use the reaction function if you would like to. Along the bottom there's a reaction feature. Perhaps after a candidate gives a response to a question, you can use the reaction function to show your opinion regarding what's happening in the conversation. For our candidates this evening, we've asked you to keep your responses nice and short so that we can get through plenty of topics and make sure that each of our candidates, we hear from you all equal amounts. So the candidates have been asked to keep their responses to 1.5 minutes in response to the prepared questions and 2 minutes for your initial introduction. I'll give you a 30-second warning when you have 30 seconds left. And once you've reached the full time, I'll ask you to make some finishing remarks. If you keep going for more than 10 seconds over the allocated time, we'll just pop you back on mute in the interest of ensuring that we can hear equally from all of our candidates this evening. And we do appreciate so much the time that our candidates have given to be here this evening. We know how busy you all are out in the electorate, campaigning and knocking on doors and attending events and meeting with your constituents. So thanks very much for being here. We're going to cover some really important topics that are really, really relevant and of great concern to the constituents across the electorate. So it's great that you could be here tonight. We are joined by Marianne Stewart from the Labor Party. Welcome, Marianne. We're joined by Cooper Riak from the Greens, Ariel Perkett from Animal Justice Party. Welcome to all of our candidates. We also invited Lee Evans, who's the sitting Liberal MP, and he's running again on behalf of the Liberal Party, who could not make it tonight, but has sent some prepared responses for each of the questions. So we'll be reading out the prepared responses that Lee Evans has sent through ahead of time. And he will be, in his absence, he'll be held to the same time constraints as the rest of our candidates. So I'll be reading his response, and I'll make sure that I keep myself to the time limit on his behalf. So without further ado, and just also a note on the order of the candidates, we've mixed up the order of each of the candidates in response to each of the questions. You know, some people like to go first, some people like to go last, and in the interest of fairness, we've mixed that up as well. So to kick us off, I'm going to throw to Marianne Stewart. You've got 2 minutes, Marianne, just to introduce yourself and say a bit about why you're running. And I will start once you get started. I'll hit go on the timer.
Thanks, Jackie. Sincere apologies for the camera not working this evening. I'm not quite sure what's happened. We've tried to do some troubleshooting, but no good this end. So sincere apologies for that. So can I please start off by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which I'm calling in from, which is Dharawal country, and pay my respects to elders past and present, and to young leaders that are emerging, and acknowledge that this land has always been and will always be Aboriginal land. So I have lived in the electorate for 52 years. I have 4 generations of my family that reside here. I care very deeply for the community and the environment. We are cuddled by the Royal National Park, the Heathcote National Park, Dharawal National Park, and also our beautiful waterways. I work for the Australian Conservation Foundation, although I've taken leave for 5 months, unpaid leave, to be able to campaign. The environment and protecting nature is extremely important to me. And the reason why I'm running is, quite frankly, because we need someone who will advocate for us, someone who is strong and immersed in the community, somebody who knows how to advocate and communicate and negotiate on our behalf to get all that we need. Not only is the environment under scrutiny at the moment, not just across the state, but across the whole planet. We need to, of course, tackle climate change.
30 seconds left.
But there's other issues in regards to health and education and public transport. And they're all the things that I want to be a strong voice for in this community. Thank you.
Great. Lovely. Thanks very much, Marianne. Thanks for setting a good example with sticking to the timer as well. Love that. So the next candidate that we're going to hear from tonight is Cooper Riak from the Greens. Cooper, if you could introduce yourself and say a bit about why you're running. Thank you.
Just checking, you can hear me all right?
Perfect.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much for inviting me today, and thank you to everyone that's shown up. I acknowledge that I live on and I'm connecting today from Dharawal country. I acknowledge the enduring connection of traditional owners to the land, water and sky, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So I live in Bundeena, surrounded by the Royal National Park, and like most kids growing up here, I caught the ferry to and from school every day, graduated from Cronulla High in 2018, then went on to study a Bachelor of Science, majoring in biotech at the University of New South Wales, which I completed just last year. As a young person facing the prospect of runaway climate change, whilst in the midst of a biodiversity crisis, it's quite easy to lose hope for a safe and livable future, and yet I hold on to hope. We already have the technology and the knowledge to solve the crises that we face. All that's missing is the political will to act. I'm standing to give my generation that hope and to give a voice to the community and environmental issues which have been largely ignored by this government. As an aspiring scientist, I believe that New South Wales Parliament needs more people with a scientific background. The climate and environmental policies of the 2 major parties are simply not up to scratch with the current science, and instead put us on track to completely blow our carbon budget and surpass 1.5 degrees of warming. So I'll just run over a few of our flagship policies when it comes to the environment. We're pushing for a moratorium on all new coal and gas, phasing out all existing coal and gas by 2030, a just transition to 100% renewables whilst supporting coal workers and communities, immediately ending native forest logging, creating a koala superhighway
30
as part of
seconds
a bold
left.
plan to save koalas from extinction, preparing all schools and students for a future in a warmer climate. And I'll add this as well, establishing a treaty with First Nations people, because there can be no climate justice without First Nations justice. Again, thank you so much for having me here and for everybody who's attending tonight.
Lovely, thank you, Cooper. The next candidate that we're going to hear from is Ariel from Animal Justice Party. Thank you, Ariel.
Hi everyone, and thank you for coming out tonight. My name is Ariel Perkett and I'm running for the Animal Justice Party in the Heathcote electorate. I'm a long-time member of the Animal Justice Party and I'm a committee member of the Young Animal Justice Party. I'm also a current university student at UNSW. I'm studying a Bachelor of Science major in ecology. So I agree with Cooper, when it comes to politics, we do not have enough recent modern science in our policies, and I believe that this is an important thing for us to bring to the table in the political side of things, is making sure that science is being understood and is actually getting discussed when it comes to new policies. Some of the things I will be, my major things for this election is stopping the pollution from the mines around the area from going into the Royal National Park and the surrounding rivers. It's very important to us as the Animal Justice Party to ensure that animals are put number one in the area and especially in national parks. Another thing we want to stop is that we want to ensure that there are safe wildlife crossings around the area, making sure no more animals are getting killed on the roads. We are really, really concerned about shark nets in the areas, especially because in Bronte last week, a dolphin died in shark nets. So it's very important for us as well to discuss these kind of things. I've volunteered for other environmental organisations in the past, things like Heathcote, and so I care a lot about just deforestation in general in the state of New South Wales.
30 seconds left.
And this is why I've decided this time round I'm actually going to stand as a candidate for the Animal Justice Party. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. Thanks for all of those very helpful introductions. So we'll get straight into our first question this evening, which was pulled together by Birdlife Australia, one of the co-hosts for this evening's event. Swift parrots are one of the most threatened birds in Australia, with an estimated wild population of 750 birds. These iconic Australian birds breed in Tasmanian native eucalypt forests over the summer period, migrating to New South Wales and Victoria for winter. The main threat to their survival is habitat destruction and fragmentation from native forestry operations. The south coast of New South Wales in particular is one of their most important mainland habitats and was severely damaged by the Black Summer bushfires. However, the area continues to be extensively logged. Unless decisive action is taken to prevent the further destruction of their forests, the species face extinction within the next 20 years. Should you be elected, will you commit to ending native forestry operations within swift parrot habitat and other threatened species habitat? And the order that we'll hear from the candidates this evening is Lee Evans, Ariel Perkett, Marion Stewart and Cooper Riak. And I will set the timer for myself and read Lee Evans' response. The species is distributed across relatively large areas and is subject to threatening processes that generally act at the landscape scale, for example, habitat loss or degradation, rather than at distinct definable locations. The key threats to the viability of landscape managed species are loss, fragmentation and degradation of habitat, and widespread pervasive factors such as impacts of climate change and disease. Many of these threats are addressed by New South Wales planning, native vegetation and biodiversity legislation, policy and programs including the offsets program. For example, biobanking as part of the New South Wales biodiversity offsets policy for major projects, biodiversity certification, management of environmental water and reservation under the National Parks and Wildlife Act of 1974. Within a region, increase the extent and quality of habitat to increase food supply and improve foraging efficiency. Focus on sites that may better function as drought refuges. Include locally occurring species that provide important food resources in revegetation programs where appropriate. Ensure that fuel reduction burns do not result in canopy scorch, which can reduce flowering in subsequent years. manage aggressive honey eater impacts through habitat modification, for example, reduce the amount of edge and establish a structurally complex understory. With the assistance of the community, monitor swift parrot distribution, abundance and habitat use. And that's a minute 30. So there was a little bit more to Lee Evans' response, but I'll just, in the interest of ensuring that we get the same amount of time to hear from each of our candidates, I'll just leave it there. And next, we'll go to you, Ariel. Thank you.
So the Animal Justice Party is the only party that is dedicated to protecting animals. We are committed to protecting native bird habitats from further land clearing practices. And to be exact, the Animal Justice Party has a policy on native birds, which includes education about the value of native birds and their interactions within ecosystems. We want to increase the monitoring of the health of the native bird populations, and land clearing is an issue for many other native birds in Australia. So not just these birds are at risk in New South Wales, many birds are at risk in New South Wales, and the number one reason for land clearing in New South Wales is animal ag. We call for the immediate cease of all land clearing associated with animal ag. We call for a transition to plant-based agriculture, which would free up over 50% of the cleared land here in Australia, and we would reforest that cleared land to create more homes and more habitat for the birds that are at risk, but also for all the other animals that are losing their habitat. We call for an immediate end to all native forestry operations, specifically the one that relates to the slips. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Ariel. Marianne, your response to the swift parrot question.
Thanks, Jackie. Land clearing rates have accelerated 72% after the Liberals and Nationals tore up environmental protections passed by the previous Labor government. There's been a 1,300% increase in land clearing approvals, which means there's even more clearing in the pipeline to come. The New South Wales EPA has also been undermined, preventing them from ensuring threatened species habitat is adequately defended in our native forests. Despite bushfires completely changing the ecological capacity of our native forests, the Liberals and Nationals have done nothing to adapt native forest logging plans to ensure threatened species habitat can be protected. The Liberals and Nationals have failed to safeguard key threatened species habitat in New South Wales native forests, including for swift parrots. Labor will work with landowners, native title entities, the forest industry, environmental groups, and workers and their unions on the management of forests at a regional landscape level, focusing on an environmentally and economically sustainable approach, reducing reliance on native
30 seconds
and
left.
meeting more of our timber demands from plantations.
Great, thanks, Marianne. And Cooper.
So the Greens commit to ending all native forest logging, full stop. We're in the midst of a biodiversity crisis, and neither of the major parties can commit to ending the clearing of native forests. We're pushing for this as a bare minimum to protect our native biodiversity and threatened species habitats, such as the habitat of the swift parrot. This Wednesday, Sue Higgins and myself will be launching the Greens Protected Area Network policy, one of the main points in this policy being that the Greens support the High Ambition Coalition's goal for 30% of land and water to be protected by 2030. We see this as an absolute minimum goal, and ideally would like to see us protect half of all land and water for nature. We want to see a strong and interconnected protected area network that is representative of every bioregion in New South Wales. So the full policy details will be announced this Wednesday, so please stay tuned. This is something that I'm really excited to be a part of sharing. Forgive me for not being able to share more details as present.
No worries. Thanks for your response, Cooper. And do keep the conversation going in the chat. If you want to react to any of the comments from our candidates, use the reaction buttons, and Melanie has helpfully posted some guidelines in the chat for posting questions. So the second question this evening is, we're in a climate crisis and an energy price crisis. Will you address both by rolling out a household energy efficiency package? This should include minimum efficiency standards for rental properties, solar on community and public housing, and additional rebates to help more households get off gas and improve the efficiency of their homes and appliances. And this time I'll throw to you, Cooper, to kick us off.
All right, thank you. So yes, and there are two aspects to our approach to this. Firstly, we'll establish a new government-owned electricity retailer while working to bring all energy assets back into public hands. This will offer electricity prices without the price hiking we're currently seeing in the privatized energy sector. Secondly, we'll help households get off gas with grants and zero interest loans to replace gas appliances with energy efficient electric heat pumps and induction cooktops. We'll introduce a ban on installing gas in new residential homes, provide support for people to install solar on their homes and businesses, introduce requirements to ensure low-income earners and renters can access energy efficient measures in their homes. And as part of this, community solar and battery projects will be a high investment priority. Community battery projects are the greatest form of energy infrastructure yet to be implemented en masse, and I'm so excited to work with local community groups such as Electrify 2515 and the relatively new Electrify Bundina group to deliver this important infrastructure if elected on the 25th of March.
Thanks, Cooper. Marianne.
Thanks, Jackie. The current government has a hodgepodge of schemes and incentives, and we want to properly measure the efficacy of these schemes and bring them together so that they are more targeted and accessible. New South Wales is one of the few jurisdictions without a gas roadmap. We need a clear, broad strategy that supports households to electrify if they want to do so. Labor's Rental Commissioner will be an advocate and voice for renters by working closely with government, consumer affairs, stakeholders and renters. The Commissioner will be responsible for identifying ways for renters to more easily access energy efficiency initiatives. Labor will also establish Homes New South Wales to be a single one-stop social and affordable housing agency to manage the delivery of social housing in New South Wales. Homes New South Wales will be responsible for maintenance and upgrades, including examining ways to improve the efficiency of social housing homes and appliances. New South Wales Labor has recently also announced the New South Wales Energy Security Corporation, a state-owned body that will accelerate investment in renewable energy to deliver cleaner and more reliable energy. Today, we announced New South Wales manufacturing TAFEs that we will be able to do in the Hunter, Illawarra and Newcastle to transition those workers and get them going on renewable energy. And we've also announced community batteries as well that will be organised under the Energy Security Corporation. And I continue to work with Electrify 2515 and Bundina as well.
Thanks, Marianne. Next on our list is Lee Evans. And in response to this question, he has sent us looks like a media release from the 17th of February. So I'll just read that out. $8 million pilot to slash home energy bills and emissions. Slashing energy bills and emissions is the focus of a new $8 million program to pilot innovative ways to fully decarbonise homes in up to 3 local communities across New South Wales. Treasurer and Minister for Energy Matt Keane said the falling price of clean energy technologies like rooftop solar, batteries and heat pumps was making it easier for households to save money on their energy bills while lowering their carbon footprint. Households can save hundreds of dollars on their energy bills by upgrading to new energy efficient appliances or installing rooftop solar, making it more cost effective to live in a zero emissions home. The trial will focus on finding the best ways to save households money on their energy bills by installing zero emissions appliances and technologies. It's all about using the latest technology to give people more control of their energy bills while contributing to New South Wales' target to reduce emissions by 70% by 2035. The New South Wales government will run a competitive process to partner with the private sector to test cost-effective ways to upgrade to zero emissions homes in urban, regional and remote communities. Mr. Keane said that no 2 homes were the same, from standalone homes in the regions to apartment blocks in the cities, making it important to trial the cheapest suite of zero emissions technologies across different communities. The pilot program will launch in the second half of 2023 and will be voluntary for households in the selected communities to join. So that was Lee Evans' response to the question. Next, we'll hear from Ariel.
Hi, the Animal Justice Party will commit to rolling out a household energy efficiency package, and more details to come on that. But we're also, to address the climate emergency, the Animal Justice Party doesn't just want to declare a climate emergency, they also want to declare a biodiversity emergency at every level of government. We plan to phase out fossil fuels and animal agriculture, two leading causes of climate change, and transition to clean energy infrastructures and plant-based agriculture. We will remove all subsidies from the fossil fuel and animal agriculture industries and redirect the funding to clean energy solutions and sustainable plant-based agriculture to make the cost of living more sustainable and affordable in the future. We support the government's subsidies on solar panels, and I personally would like to see solar panels being compulsory on each new home, the apartment building, shopping centre, or car parks, or the new buildings in Australia should have some sort of renewable energy system on it. We should be following in South Australia's footsteps within renewable energy. The Animal Justice Party also supports on getting the energy efficient zero emission
30 seconds left
in the home. The Animal Justice Party doesn't agree on the privatisation of energy companies. We would like to see the government ensuring that they're in control and we don't continue to see the cost of living rise. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Ariel. So the next question this evening is from Protect Our Water Alliance, one of the co-hosts of the event. And again, just encourage people to interact in the chat, and it's good to see so many people here on the call tonight. So thanks very much to everyone for joining us. So the question from Protect Our Water Alliance is, there is abundant evidence that mining in Greater Sydney's southern catchments does irreversible damage. Protect Our Water Alliance is calling for mining in our water catchment to stop, and they'd like to know what you and your party will do to bring mining in our water catchments to an end, noting that there's plenty of metallurgical coal in Australia which is not beneath Greater Sydney's water catchment. For the few years that metallurgical coal is still needed, what steps would you take, if any, toward ending mining in our water catchment? And we'll go back to you, Ariel, and hear from you first.
Hello, the Animal Justice Party, we are dedicated to stopping the mining under the catchments. As you know, we are also dedicated to declaring the climate biodiversity emergency. So mining under Greater Sydney's water catchment for us is very risky business as it has environmental effects. And not only to the water where the miners downstream has effect in the area, and all the animals and nature involved, particularly the frogs in the areas. There's been studies currently being done on frogs in the areas that have had effect from the pollution from the mines. So we are definitely against coal mining, and we are pushing towards a coal-free future here in Australia. We believe that every animal, every person, and all organisations in Australia have the right to having clean water, and we support water management plans that is responsive to climate change and prioritises clean water over commercial interests, and we strive to increase the number of protected water systems in the region. Thank you.
Lovely, thanks, Ariel. So next on the list we have Lee Evans, and again I'll just read out Lee's response. And I'll set the timer on Lee again. In February 2018, the New South Wales government established the Independent Expert Panel for Mining in the Catchment. The panel provides expert advice to the department on the impact of mining activities in the Greater Sydney water catchment special areas, with a focus on risks to the quantity of water in the catchment. The historical linkages and dependencies between Illawarra metallurgical coal and the primary steelmaking operations conducted at BlueScope mean that the failure of one would compromise the other. Without the Dendrobium mine, it's likely that Illawarra metallurgical coal would be an unviable business unit for South 32, and the Apard mine would be closed or possibly sold to a smaller player. The closure of these mines would lead to the immediate loss of around 1,700 high-paying jobs. Without product from Illawarra metallurgical coal, Port Kembla Coal Terminal would become unviable. This in turn may well lead to the closure of the remaining mines in the southern coalfield and the loss of a further 740 coal mining jobs. This would provide a second pathway by which BlueScope may be forced to close its primary steelmaking operation at Port Kembla, with the consequent loss of around 3,000 local jobs. Conservatively, the closure of these coal mining and steelmaking operations could cause the Wollongong region around $6.4 billion per year in lost regional product. The estimated loss of the Australian economy as a whole could be as high as $10.7 billion per year. Ultimately, the department concluded that the Dendrobium mine extension project was critically linked to the ongoing health and productivity of the key industrial entities of the Wollongong region. Thank you, Lee. We'll now go to Cooper for your response on mining in the drinking water catchment.
So, yes, perhaps the closure of those mines will risk the ongoing health and productivity of those industries, but let's also consider the ongoing health and productivity of the environment these industries are affecting. We're talking about the water supply for a very large portion of Greater Sydney, the water supply for everyone in this region. It is unacceptable that Greater Sydney is the only place in the world that still allows mining underneath drinking water catchments. At some point, we have to draw a line and say enough is enough. And I say we've reached that point. We know the effect that longwall mining is happening to the Fraser creeks and streams above. South 32's own report lists 40 damaged natural and man-made surface sites as a result of the longwall mining. And these cracked stream beds are drying out. And these are like vital water filtration systems that do go into the water catchment. We're risking our future water security with the ongoing of these industries. So let's phase them out while supporting our coal workers and communities. In this region, we have a wonderful opportunity to convert the Illawarra Steelworks into a green hydrogen steel hub, so we can continue to produce the highest quality steel in the world whilst being a global leader in green energy industries. This will take some time, so in the meantime, we can get the coal from elsewhere. We will begin the transition while supporting our coal workers and communities, and we will make the big polluters pay for it. A royalty of just $20 a tonne on export coal would bring in an additional $8 billion a year to the New South Wales state budget. It can be done, and with more Greens in the next parliament, we can push the next government to get it done. And I'd just like to add as well, thank you, Ariel, for mentioning the frog studies going on in the area. I've actually been a part of that. I've been out on some of those night expeditions to look for frogs. The preliminary studies are quite frightening. There is an ongoing issue with the health of frogs in those affected waterways, and it'll be good to see the finished study to see the full effects that the pollution has caused to these waterways in the Royal National Park.
Thanks, Cooper. Next, we'll go to Marianne for your response to the question about mining under the water catchment.
Thanks, Jackie. New South Wales Labor expects the resources sector to be safe, environmentally responsible, sustainable, and meet or exceed the regulatory standards set by government. I'm on public record on where I stand with this issue. Very passionate after living here for 52 years. The Royal National Park has been my backyard as a child. As a Labor member, I won't stand by and allow poor outcomes for our community. I won't allow the continuation of environmental vandalism by these multinational corporations. I want to see the chief scientist's recommendations implemented, including for mining companies to make public their data on water in the catchment. We want to also do water balance studies and for a standing expert group to be established on catchment cumulative impacts. Science must guide, as Cooper said before, future planning decisions. Science is very important. New South Wales Labor understands the importance of protecting Sydney's drinking water catchment. Any future projects will be assessed by an independent process. I won't make promises that I can't deliver. Lee Evans has promised that there will be no mining under the catchment, a promise he has broken over the last 12 years. Our community should remember that he hasn't done what he promised. The EPA has become a toothless tiger, $15,500 fine to this mining organisation is an absolute joke. They would make that in 10 minutes. We need to be serious in holding these multinational corporations to account in the meantime, whilst we respect and assist these workers, their families and communities to transition promptly. We hope to be elected on the 25th so we can get that roadmap out that I spoke about before with the Energy Security Corporation, community batteries. Let's get on with the job.
Great, thanks very much, Marianne. So our next question this evening has been submitted by Total Environment Centre and Sutherland Shire Environment Centre about koalas, which we know is a very important issue across the state, but particularly in the electorate where they're vulnerable to bushfire and other threats. Connectivity between the Southwest Sydney regional koala population around Campbelltown and Macarthur is vitally important because it might allow the local population of koalas to eventually replenish in the event that bushfires occur. Yet huge housing developments are planned for Southwest Sydney. What are your policies to protect the regional Southwest Sydney koala population? And will you support the corridor width recommendations of the New South Wales Chief Scientist? And would you support a moratorium on the logging of koala habitat? And the order for this question will go Marianne, Cooper, Ariel, and then I will read Lee's response. So if you could please kick us off, Marianne.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. This is something very close to my heart. About 2 years ago in the Heathcote National Park, Tom and Steve, two environmental scientists, found a colony of 120 koalas. I would now proudly say that we are up to over 150. I saved with the community a wildlife corridor, koala habitat in the southern part of Sydney in this electorate, which was going to be, it's owned by Sydney Water, it was going to be cleared, a DA was put in, subdivided and built upon. And we were able to save that. Sydney Water have pulled that DA. It is a wildlife corridor koala habitat. In fact, I was there just 2 weeks ago and I saw another koala. So what Labor will do is bring these wildlife corridors that go into the Royal National Park, Darawal and Heathcote National Park under National Parks and Wildlife. We will transfer the land across so it is protected. The situation for koalas, as we know in New South Wales, is dire. If we do not save them and stop the land clearing, they will be extinct in New South Wales before 2050. Labor supports the funding allocated to the current koala strategy. Though this plan won't stabilise and recover the population of koalas in New South Wales, it's a triage response that would still see local extinctions of several vulnerable koala populations. Labor will do whatever is possible from government to enforce the Chief Scientist's recommendations for widened corridors, adequate fauna crossings and other protective infrastructure on the Fig Tree Hill development. Labor has announced we will protect the wildlife corridor on Sydney, and we will also ensure that all public land will be assessed to identify and protect, as I've said before. I've also saved the Royal National Park in regards to the F6, 60 hectares. This is a very important part of our electorate and for this state. And we'll have more to say when it comes to protecting koala habitat through Southwest Sydney soon.
Thanks, Marianne. Next candidate for the question on koalas, Cooper.
Thank you very much. So we know koalas are highly adapted niche animals. They suffer immensely if their habitat is lost or otherwise disrupted at all. Translocation is never going to be the answer to saving koalas. Habitat protection is the only answer. And so to achieve this, the Greens have a bold plan to create a koala superhighway across New South Wales. This plan will protect and expand koala corridors to allow population growth and genetic diversity by mapping out and protecting all existing koala corridors, as well as revegetating destroyed or potential corridors to create new connections. We'll require new developments near koala habitat to include koala corridors with a minimum 450 metre width. We'll install fencing and road overpasses and underpasses to better protect koalas in urban areas and busy road crossings, such as along Heathcote Road, which is sadly in an area with such a high rate of koala vehicle collisions. We'll introduce a moratorium on the clearing of all koala habitat, as well as ending all native forest logging. We'll introduce a koala protection bill with clear powers that prohibit the destruction of koala habitat, empower local councils to protect koala habitat, and urgently act on the climate crisis by ending coal and gas by 2030. This is such an important point. 90% of all koala habitat was decimated in the 2019-2020 bushfire season. And as the climate crisis worsens, so will the severity of bushfires. When it comes to protecting koalas and indeed all native biodiversity, we must act fast to address the climate crisis.
Thanks, Cooper. And Ariel, your response to the question on the Southwest Sydney koala population.
I'd like to thank people for that. That is exactly the same kind of idea the Animal Justice Party has with koalas. As some of you may know, we have a local councillor for the Animal Justice Party in Campbelltown, and he's currently been taking other councillors out of the office onto the land where they want to redevelop, onto the land where they want to take away wildlife crossings, and showing people firsthand where this land is and how the koalas are going to be impacted. Because without showing them firsthand, people just tend to pass it off as another day at the well office, and we're trying to bring it to the attention of the people in the council how important this is. So this is one of the biggest issues that the Animal Justice Party has been working on. We have regional groups out there right now working tirelessly on protecting the southwest Sydney koalas, and especially the corridors that they are at risk of being fragmented from the Blue Mountains. So yeah, we support all of that, and we want to prohibit any new developments in the areas where there's currently koalas living and where populations are engaging, especially in southwest Sydney. We support koala wildlife crossings, and we even ensure we want them to see them wider than what they ask them to be. And we also want to educate the local public and just Australians in general about the ecosystems and how important koalas are and the services they offer to the local ecosystems where they live. We support wildlife crossings as well. We want to have a policy of protection for koalas. We are on the same page with the Greens here. Thank you, everyone.
Great, thanks so much, Ariel, for that. So the last candidate on the koala question tonight is Lee Evans, and I'll kick the timer off on Lee again. So the New South Wales government has committed more than $190 million to deliver the targeted conservation actions that the strategy sets out. These actions work towards the long-term goal of doubling koala numbers in New South Wales by 2050. The funding is to 2026. The strategy builds on the groundwork and achievements of the previous New South Wales koala strategy from 2018 to 2021, which comprised a $44.7 million investment over 3 years to stabilise koala populations. The strategy delivers targeted investment and action under 4 pillars. These actions work together to secure habitat, support local conservation, reduce threats, and improve our knowledge. Investment and key targets under each pillar are key targets of 22,000 hectares of koala habitat protected, 25,000 hectares of koala habitat restored, 1 area of outstanding biodiversity value, and 20 assets of intergenerational significance for koalas secured. And key targets of up to 8 regional partnerships with local councils and conservation groups, 10 koala stronghold areas better secured, at least 10 councils supported to develop koala habitat maps, and key targets of up to 8 regional partnerships with local councils and conservation groups, 10 koala stronghold areas better secured, 10 councils supported to develop koala habitat maps, 10 vehicle strike hotspots addressed, 8 translocation projects implemented, 500 vets and vet nurses to receive wildlife care training, baseline surveys, ongoing monitoring, genetic diversity mapping, and priority research continued. He then goes on to outline some more detail under the New South Wales koala strategy, but unfortunately that is at time for Lee Evans. And I should say, I'm sure we can provide, if the candidates wanted to provide for many more information on any of these topics, we're happy to sort of facilitate that if that works for the candidates. I can also see people engaging in the chat, which is lovely to see. Thank you for that. Thank you for being engaged, and keep your comments coming and keep your questions coming. We do only have 1 question remaining, so now's your time to think about anything that you feel hasn't been covered that you can pop in the chat. And just a reminder of the guidelines on the chat that Mel posted earlier, that we're here to be respectful, and that's how we'll all get ahead on these issues that are important. So please engage with ideas and what do we like to say? Policies, not personalities, is what it's all about. So hopefully we can remain respectful, and it's great to see that mostly that's how everyone's behaving in the chat. So please keep the questions and comments coming. So our final pre-recorded question for this evening was sent in by the Sutherland Shire Environment Centre. In 2022, coal waste from the Peabody Metropolitan Colliery polluted the Hacking River through the length of the Royal National Park. In 2022, state government also approved new coal exploration licence for Peabody under an additional 2,042 hectares of the protected Woronora Reserve water catchment. If you're elected, can you categorically rule out support for a new coal mine in this location? And what actions will your government take to ensure the Royal National Park is protected from coal waste from the mine in future? And this time we'll hear from Lee, then Ariel, Marianne and Cooper. So I'll just start us off with Lee's response. As the member who stopped coal seam gas in the water catchment, I know only too well the importance of our water catchment. The EPA is dealing with the spillage and subsequent cleanup order for the Peabody mine. The surface of the water catchment is protected, but to the core is not. In the proclamation of the Dharawal National Park, it was protected to the core to ensure no mining can take place under it. As answered in question 3, the economic and community damage must be taken into consideration in these matters. It's not as simple as just banning coal. So short and sweet response from Lee there. And now pass to you, Ariel, for your response to that question.
Thank you. The Animal Justice Party does not and will not support new coal exploration for Peabody in the Woronora Reserve. This is our top issue we're fighting for in this electorate. We want to rapidly transition to a carbon-free energy infrastructure using known clean energies in the most ecological and animal-friendly mix. It will cost the government more money in the future if we don't start phasing out coal mining now. The economy is important, but the price of increasing recurrence of natural disasters in the future will cost us more money in the long run than it would for us to transition from coal mining now and create new industries and help transition the workers to new jobs. It's time to act now and not in the future. So many animals call the Royal National Park and Heathcote their home, and expanding this coal mine would be incredibly impactful on the environment. We also believe in increased citizen participation in environmental decisions, especially community groups and environmental protection organisations, and ensuring their ability to legislate on the behalf of nature. We want to establish Commonwealth Environmental Commission with the power to implement bioregional plans, program strategies, and environmental standards. Establish a Commonwealth Environmental Protection Agency with adequate resources to monitor, enforce, and prosecute offenders. And we want to continue to educate the public about ecosystems and about biodiversity, and that the Royal National Park so people will understand why it is so crucial that we don't allow any new coal mines in the area. Thank you.
Thanks, Ariel. Marianne.
Thanks, Jackie. As I said before, I've grown up in the Royal National Park as being my backyard, and I stopped the current government tearing through 60 hectares of the Royal National Park with the F6 that would have been a tollway. So this is very close to my heart. Ensuring the health of our national parks and protecting them from pollution is not politics, it is actually the law. And after the serious and unacceptable pollution incident last year, which I took Penny Sharp down to have a look at, we examined that, the New South Wales government said it would act. The EPA needs to do its job. As I said before, it's a bit of a toothless tiger, and they need to ensure the mine is complying with its licence and it is held to the utmost account for any pollution. This is surely something that I would hope all political candidates can agree on. And if elected, I will advocate for the transition to occur for protecting the environment and every living thing and the workforce. My hope is that a new coal mine in this location would no longer be required. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Marianne. And lastly on that question, we'll go to Cooper from the Greens. Thank you, Cooper.
So the Greens have a very clear position that we will not support any new coal or gas projects. Before becoming the Greens candidate for Heathcote, I was involved in the campaign raising awareness of the pollution caused by this mine and have put in submissions to the EPA with my evidence. I stood there in September on the banks of Camp Gully Creek. I picked up the sludge with my own hands. It took me a week to get that stuff out of my nails. It is horrific. It suffocated everything along the entire Camp Gully Creek and then all the way downstream through the Royal National Park, all the way down to Audley and beyond. This is an environmental catastrophe which has occurred, and Peabody has yet to receive any fine. Marianne has rightly said, the EPA is a toothless tiger. I've made my personal position on this situation very clear. There should not be a coal mine next to the oldest legislated national park in the world. The Greens support this position and want the environmental protection license held by Peabody for their metropolitan colliery to be revoked immediately. The size and location of the colliery makes it impossible for Peabody to comply with any environmental protection license, and the mine will continue to threaten the Royal National Park as long as it is operating. We will support the affected coal workers with ready access to training and financial security. In addition, we'll push the next government to strengthen the EPA so that such pollution events as a result of any mining can actually be punished, and the companies responsible face the consequences of the damage. The $15,000 fine handed to Peabody by EPA for their spill event in January is pitiful, particularly when the fine for trespassing in this area is $44,000. This is as a result of the current government's consistent erosion of the environmental protections. And yeah, as a result, we have an EPA with no teeth. The Greens will give the tiger teeth. I'll finish on the point that, yeah, look, think of the short-term economic losses now, but of the long-term economic losses that we risk by continuing with this old and polluting industry. We're risking the health of our children, of my entire generation, of my children. The costs and damages
Wrapping up. Thanks, Cooper.
are hard to comprehend.
Great, thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you to the candidates for your very thoughtful responses to each of those questions and for the time that you put into considering those questions and preparing a response ahead of time. We really appreciate that. And thank you to everybody who's engaging in the chat. Looks like there's some good questions coming through and some good conversation happening there. So we'll do our best to ask the candidates as many of the questions that have come through as possible while sticking to time. And just in the interest of that, any questions that have come through that are similar in nature, we might just collate them or pull them together so that we're not doubling up too much. And if you are still posting questions in the chat, please remember, ask about policies and not personalities. Make sure to include a question, not just a statement. Address your questions to all the candidates so we can hear from them all equally. And this is an informative event and a safe space, so please keep the chat respectful. And I think just because we do have, we've got a few good questions coming in, and we have had a chance to hear from each of our candidates. I'll just keep an eye on the time again and make sure that we hear from each of our candidates an equal amount again with the audience Q&A. So to kick us off, the first question from the chat tonight is, what is your position on recognising First Peoples for the country on which the Royal National Park is located? Their practices may be important to healing and restoring balance to ecological and social life. If elected, what will you do during the next term of Parliament to promote the recognition of First Peoples in the Royal National Park? Great question. Thank you to whoever submitted that. We'll go you first, Cooper, given that you're on my screen, and then I'll go Marianne and then Ariel.
Thank you very much, Bruce, for that question. I would love to see the recognition of Darawal people on Darawal country. He's talking about the oldest legislated national park in the world, but this is an area which has been nurtured and cared for by the custodians of the land for 65,000+ years. This is a culture which has perfected a way of life, living in harmony with nature. When it comes to protecting our natural environments, there is no better advice to seek than this advice of First Nations people. So a joint management program with First Nations owners in the Royal National Park would definitely be something that we're pursuing. It's been done in other national parks around Australia. It's been done in other national parks throughout the world with traditional owners. It is something that we can do here.
Thanks very much, Cooper. Marianne.
Sorry, just trying to take myself off mute there.
No, that's great.
Now the dog started barking. So I would have our First Nations people at the table at all times. So for the Warrenora River, for example, has been flooding 4 times in the last 18 months. And so what I have given a commitment to those folks is, if I'm elected on the 25th, that I would form a disaster committee down there, and I would make sure that all the key stakeholders would be sitting on that committee, and that would include our First Nations people. Our First Nations people, when I speak with them, they feel like they're not included at all. They say they're not driving the car, they're not even a passenger inside the car. So as you would know, New South Wales Labor has given a commitment for a plan for treaty to work with our First Nations people. I would make sure that they are always sitting at the table as a mainstream stakeholder. Their practices over many, many years, 65,000 plus years, are proven, and we need to learn from them. We need to listen, we need to learn, and we need to act. And I would be very proud to be in a position to be able to do that with them going forward.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Marianne. And Ariel.
The Animal Justice Party is also in agreement that we need to recognise the First Nations people, and especially to the Royal National Park. I have met some First Nations people from La Perouse who told me about the history of the Royal National Park, and they can show you maps of where they had different rooms and different places where they would go and celebrate one thing and have one place for a funeral. So there is a lot of history, and yet so many people still don't know it. And so as with the Animal Justice Party, we would love them to have a seat on the table with us. We want to have them there helping us making decisions to how to protect the environment from the future, the climate crisis, and how to deal with looking after the environment to ensure that lots of the trees, and especially the endangered trees that need fire to reproduce in the future, use the knowledge and the long history that the Indigenous people have, use that in protecting the Royal National Park, but also protecting all the other areas around it. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ariel. The next question from the chat this evening is, what measures will you implement to improve accountability, transparency and engagement with your electorate, including community engagement on decision making? And order for this one, let's go Marianne, Ariel, and then Cooper.
Jackie, can you read the question out again? Sorry.
Yeah, sure. And perhaps Jade or Melanie, you could post it in the chat as well so people can follow along. The question was, what measures will you implement to improve accountability, transparency? I'm assuming that means accountability and transparency in government, and also engagement with your electorate, including community engagement in decision making.
Yeah, great question. And actually it is in the chat. It's just that I missed it, Jackie, sorry.
Oh, no worries.
So I have an organising background for over 30 years, so I know how important it is to communicate and to consult, and then to be able to mobilise people, to organise them, to advocate. So it is terribly important to me to make sure that there is accountability and transparency, as I said before, water balance study, for example, and making sure that there's transparency around the mining under the water catchment area. We must engage with the electorate. We must include community engagement in decision making about infrastructure, in regards to planning, in regards to building sustainably, because it is the ambience of their community and it is their quality of life that will be affected. So that's why I spoke about the committee that I want to set up before in the Warrenora River area, because it affects those people. There are some of those folks down there that are homeless still because of property damage and experiencing ongoing mental health issues. They're not any part of the state government decision-making process or the local council decision-making process. They're not even at the table, and they must be. So I would advocate and ensure and implement processes to ensure that those folks' community are consulted, and not just a tick and flick survey or questionnaire. Do what I do every day, which is I'm at train stations, I'm at street stalls, I'm door knocking, I'm listening to people, and then I'm acting upon that. And I'm working really hard, but if elected, the hard work only begins on ensuring that we engage, consult, have transparency, and hold ourselves to account.
Great. Thanks very much, Marianne. Ariel, on community consultation and transparency.
Well, I love the idea of setting up a community committee. I just heard. I love that. I also think it's really important that we be out in the public. I know that it's really good to hold and host events to be able to talk to the public, meet them face to face, and really understand what they've been thinking about, what is on their mind. Ensuring that there will be emails and all sorts of communication through the internet, making sure that people know that they're getting listened to, responding to emails and addressing these kind of things. Another big one the Animal Justice Party does, we actually put all our wins out on social media and on the internet. So whatever we're doing, we want everyone to know, to see that we are making difference. So I'll just continue on in that direction. And yeah, thank you.
Great, thanks, Ariel. And lastly, on community consultation and transparency in government, Cooper.
Thank you very much for that question. And a large issue that I'm hearing a lot throughout the electorate is the problem of overdevelopment. And it's a problem that's caused by a planning system which prioritizes developer profits over community need. Developer greed over community needs. I forgot that line. I thought that was brilliant. Yeah, and the Greens have a plan to bring planning powers back to local council and give communities a greater say in the developments that will affect them as a community, in a push for more vibrant and sustainable communities where communities are at the forefront of addressing those planning decisions and have greater, how do I say? Have a greater say. But as a broader scope thing, we want to restore faith in the political system, faith that has been worn away by decades of special relationships between government and business, by pork barreling. So to address this, we want to ban all corporate donations. We want to cap all political donations by to $1,000, fix political lobbying and close the revolving door between Parliament and business. We want to double funding for ICAC, and all these measures are really to just restore faith in our political system. It's something that a lot of young people decide to turn off politics because they believe there's no hope in the system. And by restoring integrity to the whole political system, we hope that more people get involved and our democracy will flourish as a whole.
Great, thanks very much, Cooper. And good to see some responses to the questions coming through in the chat there. So thanks everyone for being so highly engaged. It's great to see. And we've had up to 40 participants in the call this evening, which is very exciting to see that this is, these issues are clearly very important for the voters of the Heathcote electorate. So good on you for being here and for raising the profile of these issues with the candidates. So the next question from the floor is, please advise on the importance you place on climate change as an issue for the New South Wales state government. Whatever importance that you see, given emissions are an international issue, what are the most important actions for the New South Wales government to be taking? And this time we'll go Ariel, Cooper, then Marianne.
Climate change is an incredibly important issue right now, and it is for everyone all around the world. The two biggest things we are focusing on with the Animal Justice Party is fossil fuels and animal agriculture. Fossil fuels and animal agriculture together are the two biggest contributors of carbon and methane. A lot of the time people leave methane out of the conversation, and I know it was written into the Paris Agreement. I think it was a month or two ago, the government just signed a deal saying that they will commit to reducing their methane emissions because it is, like compared to carbon, it's more toxic, not right road. It's what's the word? Like it's about 80% worse for the atmosphere than it is as compared to carbon, but it does come out of the atmosphere quicker. So if we can create more carbon sinks and sequester the carbon, we can actually get the methane out of the atmosphere quicker. So that's why the Animal Justice Party is so dedicated to fossil fuels and animal agriculture and switching towards more of an ecosystem that is renewable energies and plant-based agriculture. Climate change is a serious issue right now. I think everyone in Australia is talking about it, but sadly the government doesn't seem to be putting it on the forefront. And so with the Animal Justice Party, we are looking to continually keep this conversation going. We're not going to back down. We're not going to stop talking about it if we get elected. We want to talk about it until we make more of a difference for climate change. And growing more trees for carbon storage. Yes, we're all about growing more trees. As I said earlier, one of the biggest reasons here for deforestation in Australia is animal agriculture. If we transition to more of a plant-based or plant-forward diet, we would free up land, and we have estimates that over 50% of land right now deforested. We could reforest and back to natural carbon. If you want to look up the Lancet report, the Lancet is a world international journal article that commissioned independent scientists from all around the world.
And just some closing remarks, if you can, Ariel.
Okay, Google your Lancet report, everyone. Have a read later. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go Cooper and then Marianne. And just to remind you, the original question was advise on the importance you place on climate change as an issue for the New South Wales government, given emissions are an international issue. What are the most important actions for the New South Wales government to take? And there was a question about using trees as carbon storage, which came through in the chat as well, yeah, you might choose to respond to, but I'll keep you to within the 2 minutes as well. Cooper and then Marianne.
Okay, thank you very much. So from the position of the Greens, climate change frames every single one of our policies. It is at the forefront of every policy-making decision, as it should be. It is a health issue. It is an issue of future sovereign risk. It is an issue that will affect all future biodiversity, including humanity. It is an issue that must have the highest priority when it comes to policy-making decisions. And we place it as such. So Ariel mentioned before, not acting on climate change now will have catastrophic economic costs in the future. So we have a current government which can't even make its mind up whether climate change is real or not, and an opposition which has a really visionless approach to addressing the climate crisis. We need bold action now, such as, and biodiversity is a major part of this. The current science says that, well, biodiversity plays an enormous role in addressing the climate crisis. So expanding the protected area network to 30% of all landmass in New South Wales by 2030, stopping native forest logging, ending all coal and gas by 2030, transitioning to 100% renewables, net zero economy by 2030. These are all targets that we can achieve if we put climate at the forefront, and if we give this such a vital issue of, it is an existential issue for future generations. If we give it the importance it deserves, we can achieve these targets.
Thanks, Cooper. And Marianne, on the importance of climate change and emissions reductions for the New South Wales government.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Jackie, and great question. So New South Wales Labor will not just talk about it, but we will actually legislate net zero by 2050. We will also legislate carbon emissions reduction, and we will establish a net zero commission who will make recommendations on how to effectively meet these targets. Climate change is the #1 issue that we need to address. We've seen flash flooding, we've seen the catastrophic fires, something that I'm well aware of since I was a little girl, seeing my dad stand on the carport, looking at the national park, trying to work out how long it's going to be before we evacuate. I've lost count how many times I've had to evacuate from around this area. I also note that the fires that we are experiencing are ones that we have not experienced before. they are catastrophic, as I said beforehand. And just listening to my brother who was in the Como Janelli fires, of seeing the fire hop from one side of the Warrenora River to the other and then roar. He says it roared, and the heat is something he'd never experienced before. It has to be our number one priority. And because of that, we have a transitional roadmap. We have a plan. We just need to be elected on the 25th of March. We will work with farmers on sustainable farming right across New South Wales. And as I said before, we will establish TAFE and domestic manufacturing to get the renewable products out quickly and make sure that we do everything that we possibly can. We've had a former federal government that sat on their hands for 10 years. They didn't even agree with the term climate change. And we have a current Liberal national government that talks about projects but does not implement them. They only delay them. We have a plan. We just need to be elected, transition the workers, have those products produced right here with domestic manufacturing, and we need to get on with the job. We cannot wait any longer.
Great. Thanks very much, Marianne, and thanks to all the candidates for responding to that question from the audience. The next audience question is an interesting one on introduced species. What actions will you take to remove the introduced deer species in Darawal country? And this time I'll go Marianne, then Ariel, then Cooper. And so the question again was, what actions will you take to remove the introduced deer species in Darawal country?
We need to address this. When I'm in Bundeena and Mainbar, even in Heathcote, the suburb itself, they are getting out of control. I am not sure of the best technique to be able to attend to this, but there is no doubt that they have got out of control, and we need to address it as a matter of urgency. It's not only unfair and harmful to those animals, but it also is for those folks that are driving in the dark on roads that are poorly lit, and we worry about their safety as well. So I'm not sure of the best technique. I actually have to be honest and say I find these sort of issues a little bit upsetting and conflictive. I do know we need to address them, but it's hard. It's hard because they are an animal, and I do care about animals. So I'll just leave it there. And if elected, I would ensure that I will seek out the most appropriate and probably the most kind method, I guess, of being able to ensure that we keep other species and the habitat for those other species protected, as well as we keep our communities protected.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Marianne. And then Ariel, how would you tackle introduced deer species?
So the first is that we want to recognise that humans are responsible for introducing non-native species to Australia, and that these animals are just trying to survive in their new environment. We need to accept that the removal and depopulation of introduced species, which may have been established for hundreds of years, is complex and difficult, if not impossible, and can have negative effects on the local ecosystem, including native wildlife. We want to immediately ban the use of lethal control methods, but we want to ensure that we are using other methods to control the introduced species or mitigate their damage. Their damage are non-lethal, humane, effective, and species-specific, like the deers. A lot of the time, people will just use any way to try to reduce it, but we need to find something that is works specifically on the deer. And we want to invest in research for new humane fertility and biological population control methods. And we want to reduce the impact of introduced species by protecting and focusing and having people looking at the areas to re-establish native plants and other native animals, while looking at the options and how we can reduce the introduced species. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Ariel. And Cooper on controlling introduced deer species.
Thank you. And yeah, this is an issue which is quite difficult to deal with. We are talking about a live animal here, but we do know that deer and fox species, as well as invasive plant species, have exploded across the Royal National Park. And what we know is that the current culling program for feral deer is not working well enough. What we know is that the current baiting program for feral foxes results in the runoff of highly poisonous substances into waterways, which affect native species. There must be better ways of looking at this. And I was really excited to hear Ariel's answer to this, because I know that this is where her party shines. So I'd love to look into the most current and humane methods of reducing feral animal populations, and working with groups such as the Invasive Species Council to achieve the best possible, most humane outcome, but also the necessary outcome of removing these invasive species from the national park. I mean, speaking from a personal point as well, I've had to dodge many deer on the road. I think there has been quite a few accidents caused as a result for Bundeena residents. So yes, it is an important issue, but it's also an issue which does tug at the heartstrings a little bit. Deer are quite cute.
Thanks, Cooper. There's been a couple of questions about transport as well. So I might just ask a question on transport. What are your thoughts on building developments with minimal roads? Currently, new housing developments are 70% for cars, roads, driveways, etc. And in the same vein, catching the train from Thirroul is still very slow. And, you know, there's been talk about promises of a fast train. When will the public transport reach the 21st century? So sort of a two-part question on travel there. Thoughts on building developments with minimal roads, and how can we get public transport up to the 21st century? And this time I'll go Cooper, Marianne, and then Ariel.
So yeah, as you said, how do we get public transport up to the 21st century? I've heard people at the Thirroul Rail Institute, where we spoke at yesterday, mention that rail frequencies and times are about the same as they were in the steam age. I mean, they're the rail experts. I'm going to assume they know they know the stats. So no city or locality in the world has ever solved traffic issues by adding more roads. It simply creates more demand for cars on roads, which then the antiquated solution is, oh, let's build more roads, which then creates more demand. It's a constantly compounding issue, which is not solved by more road transport, but is instead solved by increasing the availability and accessibility of public transport. The South Coast Rail line has been neglected for the past decade. I know there's been upgrades going into stations to make the stations more accessible, and that is wonderful to see. But we've had privatized bus services all across New South Wales, and a train service which has not received the frequency or funding it needs for those frequencies. And if we took the budget, or at least a portion of the budget that's put into building and developing new roads, and instead put that into initiatives such as making public transport free, increasing the frequency and accessibility of all forms of public transport, we will see improvements to communities. We will see improvements to traffic. We'll see improvements to the livability and accessibility of our communities. And sorry, I forgot to add this earlier, active transport as being an integral part of a community's transportation network. Again, all of these initiatives reduce traffic, and yeah, it's about time that our planning system actually reflects the needs of a community and actually looks at the evidence throughout the world. And yeah, public transport is the way to go. Make it free.
Thanks, Cooper. Thanks for that. Marianne, on roads and public transport.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. Our roads are a mess. We know that. We keep spending money on these new northern beaches, harbour tunnels and things like that, but we get very little love in this electorate when it comes to road maintenance. And we need to get to work. We need to take the children to school. So that's something that we need to address in regards to roads and keeping ourselves safe. In regards to trains very important to me. I'm the daughter of a train driver, so I'm very passionate about public transport. And tomorrow morning I'll be down at Austinmere Station at 6 a.m. So I'll be going down the Bulleye Pass, and as I go down the Bulleye Pass, there'll be hundreds of cars going past me. I want to get people out of their cars. I want us to be able to get our transport network moving. So not just trains, but also buses. We had more trains back in 2011, more train services than we do now. There's not been a timetable review from 2019 onwards, and we've had COVID. So we have more people that have moved out into the urban fringes who are working from home. And then when they're needing to get somewhere, they need to get somewhere faster. Cronulla line always is a priority. They always get a priority. If there is a landslide, if there is flash flooding, Cronulla will get the priority all of the time. And it is unfair, and nobody fights for us and nobody advocates for us. And so that's what I will do. New South Wales Labor will deliver more express services by conducting a review of the timetables, and that's going to be with community consultation across both the Sydney Metro network and the wider New South Wales Trains network. As I said, communities are surging in growth, but passengers are leaving the train network. We want to have those frequent services all day, not just in peak times, rather than only during the traditional morning and evening peaks. The review of the train timetable will be coordinated with other modes to ensure a seamless journey for customers, so that the buses in Helensburgh meet the trains and they don't have to walk up that doozy of a hill, for example. That is important. It will mean it's cleaner and greener. And as I said, we need to get people out of their cars. When I'm at Waterfall Station, I meet people that drive up there from Kiama. Today I was at Sutherland train station and I met people that come from Wollongong. So it's imperative for our quality of life and to protect and help the environment that we get people out of their cars and we have a very well-rounded transport network, so buses and trains, to enable people to have that as the best option for them, to keep them safe.
Thanks,
and also
Marianne.
to ensure. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And Ariel on transport.
So the Animal Justice Party also agrees that widening the roads does not improve any traffic. We want to cease the expansion and widening of road networks, not only because it doesn't improve traffic, it also destroys ecosystems, and it also takes away the space for the animals, and it increases the chances of animals getting hit on the road. We would love to see more funding and more focus on public transport, especially the trains and buses. It does seem unfair that Heathcote doesn't seem to have as efficient trains and bus services as the rest of Sydney, especially when you're seeing different metros getting put in, and you also see tunnels getting put in the city for other places. And yet it feels like Heathcote is always missing out. The Animal Justice Party is all about public transport because it also combats climate change. So we would love to see and help get more public transport and more efficient public transport to the region. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Ariel. And I know there was a lot of questions coming through in the chat, and hopefully the candidates have been able to see those questions and get a sense of what the issues are that are on top of mind for people across the electorate. So I want to thank everyone for engaging in the chat and for your questions, and I would like it if everyone could join me in thanking the candidates for giving up their evening to be with us this evening and to take a position on some really important issues for the electorate. Thank you very much for your time. I know you're all busy on their campaign trail, so really appreciate you being here. And I would like to thank all of the groups that helped put the event on tonight. Thank you very much to Birdlife Australia, to Protect Our Water Alliance, to the Sutherland Shire Environment Centre, and to Total Environment Centre. It was great that you could all put some questions together to the candidates, and you're all doing such great work in the electorate to raise environmental issues. I'm sure that the local groups will all be out and about campaigning as well in Heathcote between now and the 25th of March. I'd also just like to mention that there's an event on Wednesday night this week at Town Hall in Sydney. The Nature Conservation Council is hosting a forum with the Environment Minister, James Griffin, the Labor Environment spokesperson, Penny Sharp, and the Greens Environment spokesperson, Sue Higginson. And that's a forum on Wednesday evening, 6 p.m. at Sydney Town Hall, and it will be moderated by the Sydney Morning Herald environment journalist, Nick O'Malley. So if you are interested in these issues and you want to take a statewide vision, as well as obviously the local view, I'd encourage you to come along to Town Hall, and I hope to see some of you there. And I look forward to continue to see how the campaigning for environment issues go across Heathcote and across the state between now and March 25. So you could perhaps join me in virtually clapping as we thank Ariel Perkett, Cooper Riak, and Marion Stewart for coming along tonight. Thank you very much for coming, and let's keep environment on the agenda.
Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you so much for organising this.
Thanks, Jackie, Jacqueline, Melanie, for arranging it, and for all of the organisations and their questions, and for all of the attendees. We really appreciate seeing you. Sorry, I couldn't get my camera working. Yeah, but I appreciate your attendance, and thanks to Cooper and Ariel as well.
It's a Zoom meeting, Marianne. There's always going to be some issue. It's all right. But yeah, thank you to you for attending as well. Thank you to Ariel, and to Nature Conservation Council, Birdlife Australia, Total Environment Centre, Sutherland Shire Environment Centre, Power. Thank you so much for everyone for organising this, and to everyone for coming.
And I would like to
thanks
thank everyone as well.
Thanks all. See you.
Have a good night. Toodaloo.